Welcome back to Hudson Appliance for another episode of Wicked Good Food. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and today it's all about these rotisserie chickens. These are like the best invention ever at the supermarket. I love them. I rarely will roast a chicken at home, certainly not one that's small. If I'm going to do one, I'm going to do a nice big chicken and feed a bunch of people, but for a quick meal on the go, you can't beat it. We eat these, I don't know, a couple times a month, and we don't always eat a whole chicken, or if we get a couple, if there's people, there's always leftovers. So the theme of our show today is, what are we going to do with what's left over in the chicken? So one of the things we're going to make, one of the things I always make at home, and the first thing I made was some chicken stock out of it. I've got some simmering over here. Why don't you check this out and I'll show you how I made it. Welcome back. So, chicken stock is just those basic ingredients put together. If you don't have all of them, it doesn't matter. If you just put the chicken bones in some cold water and simmer them, you're going to end up with chicken flavored broth, and it's going to be great. We're going to use it in a couple dishes today. We're actually going to use it in a risotto. We're going to make a hash out of the chicken, and we're going to make quesadillas, and we're going to make, obviously, our chicken stock. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to cut up some onion. I have an onion already cut in half here. I'm going to move the chicken out of the way. So this is going to go in our risotto, in our hash, and maybe we'll put a little bit in the quesadilla. So what I want to do is I want to cut these pretty much as thin as I can. Just because of what I'm using them for. If you love big hunks of onion, certainly cut them larger. But make those little cuts, cut perpendicular to those first ones. You get some pretty small bits here. They don't have to be perfectly square or anything, but you do want them to be consistent in size so they take the same amount of time to cook. All right, I'm going to do another one here, the same size. Like I said, we're going to use the same onion in 3 different dishes. So this is going to be for 2 of our dishes here. We'll put that here. This we're just going to reserve. Then for our hash, we're going to use these onions here. And we're going to use some potatoes. So there are a few different ways to do this hash. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to dice these potatoes really quite small so that they cook right in the pan. What I'm going to do is cut a flat surface so it doesn't roll around on me. And I'm cutting them about 1/4 inch or so thick. Then I'm going to stack them up. Make little matchsticks out of them. And then once again, we'll cut perpendicular to that. And so what my goal is by having them that tiny is that we're actually going to cook this all in one pan. If you want larger pieces of potato, by all means cut them larger, but what you're going to need to do is to par cook them. You can use leftover potatoes for this, but you can just drop them in some simmering water if you want and cook them. They need to be relatively soft if they're pretty big, just for the sake of them actually being fully cooked when you go to eat your hash. All right, so that's it for our hash prep. I'm just going to move that off to the side, move our onions off to the side, and then we'll get to our chicken. So this is great if people want to make stock and you don't want to buy a whole chicken. Some people get all queasy about handling the raw chicken, but they're all right with digging into one that's already cooked. So a couple things to think of is if you know you want to do this, it might be a good idea for you to cut the meat off the bone before you serve it, or tear it off with your hands, so that people aren't eating on the bones and throwing them back or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to pull the meat off this chicken. But like any chicken, the breast runs right here, and you can just take your hand and get right in there and pull the whole breast off. Just like that. And so this is exactly what we're going to use in all these different dishes. I have a bucket of chicken there I'm working on. And then the wings. So depending on the wings, sometimes these get a little crispy, right? I can pull a little meat off there, but it's a little bit beat up. So either gnaw on this, which is what I usually do, or throw it in your stock. And then the other part of your chicken is your leg and thigh. And that just pops right off. And what I'm going to do is just separate the two. And then the same thing, pull the meat off the leg. Now, if you're a big chicken eater, you know that there are these little tendons that run through the leg. So you want to try to pull all those out. But this is the best piece, and this is never ever left over in my house at least, is the thigh. But I'm going to take that, I'm going to pull the skin off, because the skin is the best part, and that's a good snack. But if you're not a huge skin eater, please throw it in your stock. It'll impart an awful lot of flavor into your stock, and it'll add a little bit of fat, but that is fat that you can skim off in the end. So I'm going to take a quick minute, wash my hands, finish pulling this apart first, get ready to start our hash. All right, welcome back. So one of the things I want to show you about the stock is something that's real important if you want to make a nice, clear stock. And that's to skim all this stuff off the top. You just take your ladle and just dip it in there a little bit and kind of move it around. And you'll be able to get an awful lot of this. And what this is there's proteins in here that have actually coagulated and trapped some stuff. There could be a little bit of dirt or little bits of blood or whatever it might be from the vegetables or from the chicken. And you can just kind of skim that off as it goes. Now check this out. We've got a nice clear stock going here. This has been on for almost an hour now, which you want to go a couple hours if you've got it to get as much flavor as you can out of there, but that's going to be nice and flavorful. All right, so we're going to move over here, and this is where we're going to build our hash. So the first thing we're going to do is add some bacon fat, because what's hash without bacon fat? If you don't happen to have any bacon fat, you can use a little bit of butter. Go ahead and add our onions to that. We're going to give these just a moment to soften up a little bit, but we're not looking to cook them a ton, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to add our potatoes right to that. We're going to give that just a moment. And then right here, I diced up about another half potato. So we've got half an onion and a decent sized red potato and a half altogether. Another thing about your stock, about trying to keep a nice, clear stock, is to just have it just barely simmering. I don't know if you noticed, but it was just barely simmering. If it comes to a big rolling boil, all that stuff we skimmed off the top gets reincorporated into it, and you're not able to skim it off. All right, so these are starting to turn a little translucent. I'm going to turn the heat down a bit and add the potatoes right to it. And I just want to take these and toss them around and just quickly coat them in a little bit of bacon fat that's in there. And so these are totally raw potatoes. So if we just let them in here to cook, they would cook, but they're going to take longer than we want, and they're going to brown unevenly. So we're going to take some of our wonderful stock we're in the process of making. Nothing wrong with using it while you're going. I'm going to pour some in there. Oh, I got a carrot in there. Oh well. All right, that looks great. We're going to let that keep going. Now in the meantime, we're going to use some more of these onions, and we're going to start our risotto. So I'm going to turn this on, turn this burner on. I have a couple knobs of butter here I'm going to put in. And I'm going to go ahead and add our onions. So we're making a pretty basic chicken risotto. We're going to use our chicken stock. We're going to use our chicken meat. We're also going to finish it with a little bit of cream and a little bit of cheese, just because who's going to stop us, really? So we're going to let this warm up a bit. Let's pray. And it's important that you use enough fat. We're using butter here. If you wanted to make this, a completely chicken risotto, if you happen to have some chicken fat laying around, use chicken fat. That'll give you even more flavor. But regular oil will work too. So what we want to do is let those soften, and then we're going to add our rice. And so the rice we're going to use is one of the few varieties that they use for risotto, and that's this arborio rice. And you can see it there. It's a pretty small grain rice. They're kind of small and fat. So that looks good. I'm going to add our rice right to it. And what you're looking for when you're picking out a rice for risotto, and I don't know if I just said, but this is arborio. Carnaroli is another. And what they are is it's a real short, fat grain, like I said, but they're filled with starch. As opposed to these long grain rices and the medium grain rices that you're told to never ever stir, this is one that you actually want to stir it. The reason that you want to stir this is to release all that starch. The reason you're not supposed to stir the others is so that you don't release the starch. So you end up with a rice that has individual grains of rice. So before I add any stock to this, I want to let it go just to let my rice actually blister a little bit. I want to let it warm up and heat through. And that's looking good. Then I'm going to check one of these potatoes here and just see how we're making out. Still a little bit crunchy. That's all right, though. That's kind of where we expect it to be. So now at this point, this is nice and hot here. We're going to go ahead and add our stock. Now you notice I did not measure the rice that I put in there. So the rice is going to essentially triple in size. So if you have a cup of rice, you're going to end up with 3 cups of finished risotto. But it doesn't matter your measurements exactly because we're going to add it until it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and add some stock right to it. This time I'm going to try to avoid that carrot that's in there. And you just want to add enough to kind of bring it up to the level of the rice. Then you're just going to let it be. I'm going to turn our heat down a bit. And what's going to happen here is as it cooks, the rice is going to absorb some of that stock. Some of it's evaporating here in this mist of steam in front of me, but it's going to absorb some of this stock. And you can come back and keep stirring it. This will still take 20 minutes or so, just like regular rice will, but it takes a lot more care because you have to sit here and kind of baby it. And you can see already how it kind of looks kind of milky in there almost. And that's that starch being released from the rice. So now that it's almost all absorbed into the rice, we're going to add some more stock. Now it never hurts to taste your stock beforehand. Make sure it tastes good. You can add a little bit of, if you find it's super weak, you can add a little bit of store-bought stock to it if you want. But we're going to let this go. I'm going to repeat that process as it continues to absorb. We'll mix this around, let this cook for a couple minutes. When we get back, we'll get on to building our chicken salad and finishing these dishes. All right, so our potatoes are pretty soft. Our risotto's making its way along. I'm going to keep adding some more. I'd say it's about 75% of the way cooked at this point. Now, a great trick is, if you wanted to serve this, say, tomorrow, you could stop it at this point, pull it off, spread it out on a sheet pan, let it cool down, and then, so you don't have to spend the whole time making risotto, you can just finish it by adding the rest of the stock and whatever other ingredients you're going to add. Now, here our potatoes are almost soft. I diced up some of our chicken. I'm going to add it right to it. I'm going to add a generous pinch of salt and a nice pinch of pepper right to that. And I'm going to throw in some fresh thyme as well. I'm just going to take these leaves and just kind of strip them off. You don't need a ton of it. Well, however much you want, I guess. I love the smell of fresh thyme. Anytime you can use a fresh herb, use the fresh herb. Beware that the dry stuff is a lot stronger, so if a recipe calls for a teaspoon of dry, be ready that you might actually need like 3 teaspoons of the fresh stuff to get up to that level of flavor. So I'm just going to stir this around, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to actually kind of force it into the bottom of the pan. Because now what I want is I want this hash to get some golden brown color. So that's why we're using this cast iron skillet too, because it holds its heat so very well. So I'm going to take some chicken now, some of this chicken we cut up earlier, and I'm going to take it and just chop it up. So this is going to be the filling for our quesadilla that we're going to make. And for this, I'm not going to dice it as fine as I did there. I'm just going to kind of cut it in strips, just going right with the grain. And there's a little bit of breast, it's mostly breast and a little bit of thigh here. And that's probably enough. Now, these chickens that you get from the store are already seasoned up a bit, but we're gonna help that seasoning along. And for this quesadilla, I want to use some fresh lime juice. So I'm going to take a lime, cut it in half, squeeze some fresh lime juice in there. You can help yourself out with a spoon. Just kind of stick that in there and twist the spoon, but that's plenty of lime juice. And we're going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of oregano, a little bit of cumin. So essentially it's like we're making our own taco seasoning here. And a little bit of onion powder. I'm going to use my lime spoon and just stir this up a bit. And always taste, always taste. That's quite good. That's very good. I have a nice sharp cheddar cheese we're going to use with that. Now I'm going to grab some more chicken. And so this last chicken is going to be for our chicken salad. I love using chicken like this for chicken salad. I know a lot of people like to boil their chicken, but I think you kind of do a disservice to the chicken by boiling it. A lot of the flavor of the chicken comes out, and you don't get any caramelization or anything. So to roast it or to use something like this, I think you get a more flavorful chicken salad. Now it's going to be a little bit different color because you have some brown from the chicken itself, but I have no problem with that. So we're going to take a minute. I'm going to cut up the rest of our chicken. We'll get ready to get the rest of the things for our chicken salad. We'll keep working on our risotto, and we're going to let this crisp up nicely. So our risotto's looking good. It's almost al dente. It's got a little bit of a bite left to it, a little more than a little bit of a bite. Some people like their risotto with quite a bit of bite. I like mine almost completely tender, but it should never be mush, and it still should have a little bit of a bite to it. So we're a little before that. I'm not quite ready to serve it, so I turn the heat down really low. You can take a look at our hash here, and we're getting some nice color on the bottom. So I'm gonna take it and try to scrape the bottom of the pan. I'm going to scrape all that goodness off and kind of flip it over on itself. And I'm going to turn our heat back up a little bit on this and let it keep going. Once again, just to get a little bit more color. Now to our chicken salad. We're going to make a pretty quick, pretty easy, but what I think is a pretty good chicken salad. We're going to start out with mayonnaise. Always real mayonnaise. Always, always. And you know what? We don't talk about brands a lot, but there is actually a big difference in Hellmann's. I found it's the best. You can buy a lot of things I buy the store brand of, but you can't beat that. All right, we're going to add some sour cream, about equal parts. Sour cream and mayonnaise. We'll give it a quick little stir. Give it a pinch of salt, pinch of pepper. Now, if you notice that when you ate your chicken, it was a little over-seasoned, be careful with your salt and pepper before you don't want to go too heavy if it already has some on there. We're going to add some of our diced onion from before, just a little bit, just for a little contrast. And for another little contrast in texture, we're going to add some celery. So I'm going to take this celery, just cut it into little sticks. All right, that should be about good. So our celery is going to go right in. And we're going to add some nice fresh tarragon. So tarragon has that kind of anisey or fennel flavor to it that I think complements the chicken really well. So it'll pull off, I don't know, it's a dozen or so leaves, and give them a quick rough chop. I don't mind if there are a couple in there that are a little bigger, but You don't want any that are monstrous, but that's gonna give us a little contrasting color as well. So for some acidity, we're gonna use a lemon. I'm gonna squeeze it in my hand just to catch that one seed that's hanging there, and there it is. Now you don't need as much acid as if you were gonna make this with just mayonnaise, because we have half sour cream. That sour cream is sour. That's got some acidity to it. So we'll mix that around a bit. Then we can add our chicken. So I went and just chopped this. However, whatever size you want your chicken to be. Fold this around a bit. And once again, this is one of those things, if you really don't like a super mayonnaise-y chicken salad, which I do not like, use a little bit of less mayonnaise, a little bit of less sour cream. If you love it, load it up. Nobody's gonna stop you. The last ingredient we're gonna add are some grapes. And one of the things I like about grapes is just their sweetness. And I think, once again, this works really well with all the different little contrasting things we have going on. You can take them and cut them into little wedges if you want. You can take them and cut them in little rounds, or you can just kind of take them all and just go through them. Give them a quick chop, which is what we're gonna do. And you want them, once again, to be consistent in size. You probably have noticed that I'm not a huge stickler for having everything be exact, but you do want things to be similar in size. So that goes right in there. And we're gonna take this and mix it up. Just fold it together a bit. You know, if you ever get one of these roasted chickens that they left on too long and it's actually a little dry, making chicken salad, making something like this where you're adding some fat to it with the mayonnaise and sour cream is a great way to go. All right, I want to try a little bit of this and just see. It's got really good flavor. Yeah, it's quite good. And a lot of that flavor comes from the roasted chicken itself. I can taste the chicken, which a lot of times in chicken salad you can't taste. So let's take a look at this. Good, so we got some nice browning here. All right, I'm gonna take a quick minute. I wanna get our chicken salad into the refrigerator. We're gonna get our hash out of the way, bring up our mise en place. We're gonna go through our quesadilla, and we'll get Arthur up here and see what he thinks about our chicken. All right, welcome back. I got our chicken in the refrigerator. Remember, you want to keep this chicken in the refrigerator. You probably have already served it once. It sat on your table. As soon as you can, get it in the fridge. If you're going to work with it, nothing wrong with working with it. Get it back in the refrigerator as quick as you can. So I've got some cheese here, nice, super sharp cheddar cheese. Don't be afraid to buy in good cheese. Even if the cheese is, you know, $5 more a pound than you're used to buying, you're not necessarily buying pounds of it. It only ends up being a couple bucks extra, and I think it's well worth it. Certainly well worth it. So I've got some nice cheddar cheese here. This is warm, so I'm gonna heat it up a little bit more. I'm gonna add a little oil to my skillet. Take my tortilla, put it right in, kind of mix it around a bit. And then, so this is, you can take them, fold them in half if you want. I'm gonna make these ones with 2 pieces. But you can do the same thing. Doesn't really matter. But since I'm doing 2 pieces, I'm gonna make sure I spread the cheese around all the way to the edge. And then I've got that chicken meat that we seasoned with the lime and the taco flavored, taco type seasoning. Just kind of spread this around in there. You don't need as much as you think. At least I don't need as much as I think. Then I'm gonna go ahead and, I wanna put a little cheese on top because the cheese is gonna act like glue almost. Put this on, flatten it down a bit. And you can put a little oil if you want on top of this other tortilla because we're gonna flip that as it cooks. Now, to finish our risotto here, we've added all the stock we're gonna add. It's almost completely cooked. I tasted it. It does need some salt. Because remember, there's almost literally no salt in there at this point. We're using the stock. There's a little salt on the seasoning from the chicken, but not much. And some pepper. And I'm going to add some heavy cream. A couple ounces of heavy cream. Just mix this around a little bit. And now at this point, I'm going to shut off the heat. And I'm going to sprinkle in some Parmesan cheese. Just like that. And here our risotto's done. Although, you know what I forgot to add? I forgot to add the chicken. But I'll add some chicken to it before Arthur gets up here. But this is all set. I'm going to move this back here with our hash. We can turn the heat up a bit more on this one. So what we're going to do, we'll let this cook, get it golden brown, flip it, get it golden brown. I'm going to clean up my mess, make a couple more of these, and then I think it's time for Arthur to be up here. Hey, Arthur.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Great. Welcome back.
Thanks. Another beautiful day here at Hudson Appliance. All about leftover chicken today.
Was this yesterday's chicken we're eating today?
Essentially, I did buy them earlier today, but
Okay.
you get the idea.
Yep.
A couple of those rotisserie chickens from the supermarket.
Yep.
One of the first things we did was we took all the bones and some carrots, onion, celery, and made a little stock.
Okay.
Let that simmer actually the whole time we were here, and we used that stock in this, which is a chicken risotto. Ooh. It's got a little bit of cheese, a little bit of cream in it, and a chicken hash.
Chicken hash.
Chicken hash. So there's potatoes and onions and some fresh thyme, along with some of our chicken stock.
Now you do the same thing with this as you would corned beef hash.
Exactly. It's the same idea. Yep.
Okay.
And then here we've got some chicken salad. Pretty basic chicken salad. It's got a little lemon and a little sour cream to make it a little different. And it has tarragon, which I love, going with the grapes. From what I hear, Donna usually puts some grapes in there too. So It should be a little familiar. And then the last thing we made was these cheese quesadillas.
Okay.
A little bit of fresh lime juice, a little bit of essentially like taco seasoning, you know. One thing at home that you notice is you can see a little bit of fat on the top as I strain that out. So if you wanted to get that out, you could skim it out like we were skimming before, or throw it in the fridge, it'll turn solid. Okay. And we pull it right out. What do you want to try first?
Well, let's start on your side with the chicken salad.
I think that's a good idea.
Excellent taste to it. Excellent.
Yeah. And it tastes like chicken. That's one of the things that I like about using this kind of chicken. And then this is our chicken hash.
All right. I can just picture this with eggs on it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to suggest. A nice poached egg on top. Be beautiful.
Oh, that's good too. Really good.
A little bit of bacon fat. That's where that little bit of smokiness comes from.
Yeah.
That's what we started with.
Let's try the risotto though.
All right. It came out nice. Got a little texture to it still, but it's cooked. And that's that homemade chicken stock. Okay. You can't beat that.
Let's try these.
Yeah, we might have to go in caveman style. There you go. And so this has that chicken with the lime and.
Oh.
So what do you think?
Now that's
Wicked good.